Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from which we join our meeting today, and also the land that we work on. Our guest speaker Sharon is joining us from Gunnakurna country, and I'm joining from Wadawurrung. And the actual seed bank that Seeding Victoria is located on Djadja country. So we pay our respects to elders past and present from those groups, as well as the many groups where we all conduct our fieldwork. Please feel free to acknowledge where you're all joining us from in the chat as well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Al Fox, and I'm the Partnership Coordinator at Seeding Victoria. Seeding Vic is a not-for-profit organisation whose mission is to store and supply local provenance seed for conservation and rehabilitative projects. This year is our 30th year of operation. Thank you to all of you for joining us for our very first Seeds of Knowledge webinar. This is a program that's been very generously funded by the Bull Oak and Northern Grampians Landcare Network. And I really want to thank them because this is something that we at Seeding Victoria have been wanting to run for a while now. There will be 6 guest speakers as part of the whole program, including Sharon, over the course of the next year or so. And we're aiming for a presentation every other month or so. So please keep an eye out via our socials, so on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and X or Twitter for the next one as well. This program is designed to really connect all the important communities that have a stake in conservation and ongoing sustainability by really linking the general public, land managers, practitioners and contractors and science. All these communities have a massive role to play in the future of our environment, and we want information to be readily accessible and available between all these groups. There'll be a range of speakers representative of all these different groups within the natural resource management community as part of this program. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our very special guest first speaker of the series, Sharen Coulter, the Seed Bank Coordinator at Habitat Creations. I'd like to really thank Sharon for not only being so enthusiastic about being a speaker, but also for her putting up with my practice runs while I figured out the best way to run the presentations. So thanks for being my guinea pig, Sharon, and I'll pass on over to you now.
Hi there. Well, I have to thank you, Al, for this opportunity to contribute to this wonderful program. I think it's such a great thing for our community of like-minded people to be able to share information and all that sort of thing. And a really special thank you to you personally for helping me along this journey where my comfort zone is out in the bush, not necessarily in front of a computer. So together we muddled through, and hopefully we can make it work. You know, hopefully I can share my experiences to provide some sort of information for everybody out there. And also thank you to everyone for tuning in. So brief introduction of myself and my journey. I completed an apprenticeship in an Australian native production nursery a long time ago, where I became qualified as a nurseryman. That's how long ago it was. We're now called horticulturalists or something fancy like that. But along my journey, I sort of completed my apprenticeship, as I said, in Australian native production nursery, wholesale and retail. So it was really sort of at the start of my career that I got to know and love Australian natives, and it's nice to know that I've come full circle, and towards the end of my career, that's what I'm still involved with. It's just been a passion of mine all my life. In between that time, over the years, I've worked in the industry in both local and state government levels. In local government, I worked at a local council as an assistant nursery manager, but as part of that job, I was scoping a remnant native re-veg site, collected seed and did all sorts of things, mapping for that sort of site too, which was really interesting. Following on from that, I've worked in wholesale and retail nurseries in managerial positions. I've had my own little retail nursery. For the last 7 years, I've been employed at Habitat Creations. For the first 5 years, I was in the nursery, And for the last coming up 2 years now as seed bank coordinator of our recently established seed bank, which I've had the privilege of setting up. Most people in our organisation say I have the best job in the world and the best job in the company, and I kind of think so too. So I'm very blessed and very lucky to do what I do. Habitat Creations is a family-owned company that offers a range of environmental services, including a wholesale nursery supplying Indigenous tube stock, large-scale landscaping and conservation and land management services as well. So we're basically the on-ground people putting into practice and interpreting all the sciences and studies of putting and trying to put them into action. And it's, as such, we have been involved in some really amazing and interesting and challenging projects. So because we do sort of from start to finish, as far as environmental services go, we get to experience and be part of a lot of really cool, innovative and progressive projects in the environmental space, which is pretty exciting. And it's a great place to be, always learning something new, but always, at the same time being able to offer our professional services, which is really good. So start by, if I can just work my thing. So basically I'll sort of give you a little bit of a rundown of what our company does, and a little bit about what I do as well, to sort of give you a bit of a snapshot about what we do as a company and what we're involved in. So starting off with, I guess, my part of the company, which is, I guess, the start of the whole process, and that's the seed bank. So my job is collecting and processing seed for then use in our nursery, which we supply plants as well as supply and install for all of our projects. So it's quite a big task. We're coming up to, I think this year, about 1.6 million tube stock plants. For all of those, I have to either collect, find, take cuttings, or outsource seed if I can't collect it. And that's where, thankfully, I use the services of Seeding Victoria, which is marvellous, because a lot of our projects we use seed that's provenance based, and for a lot of projects that we do in the western suburbs of Melbourne. So that's really handy to have. So a bit of an idea of my seed collecting processes. I kind of use, as you can see up in the right hand corner, I find it really handy. I actually use the paper shopping bags to do my collecting, because I find them really handy to carry around. Seed goes straight in them, and then I can bring them back into the seed bank, hang them straight up in, and they're ready to go drying. I also use bread crates, so I can stack them and I can lay the seed in there, and I can stack them high for space, but they'll still get good airflow. And they're my little sort of tricks of the trade that sort of I do to make it work as well as I can for what I've got in there. The fridges, I store the seed in plastic bags and in plastic containers, all labelled alphabetically for easy access. I know what I've got. We're involved in a seagrass restoration project, and I'm currently storing that seed, which you'll see at the bottom left-hand corner of the fridges. There's like a little black package there, and I've got little seagrass seeds in there storing, which I'll explain a bit later on. With my seed collecting and, I guess, germinating sort of processes, I kind of like to think or try and replicate what nature does for sort of successful germination and so forth. So it's about sort of understanding how they germinate in the wild as to how that we're going to grow them, and successfully. So, for instance, in the middle there is just an example of some Banksia cones that I've collected. It's actually Banksia serrata, this one, which quite a huge cone, and those seed pods are quite large and hard. And I tried to dry them out for ages, but they weren't having a bar of it. So I experimented and had a little bit of a Banksia barbecue. I found that with that heat and that smoke, they open readily, and I was able to extract the seed quite quickly. So I'm hoping, and I think, as I believe from the nursery, that germination was quite successful with this particular batch of seed. We usually use smoke water to encourage sort of germination for this seed, but I think with this initial sort of cooking of the seed in a barbecue type arrangement, it sort of emanated what would normally happen in the bush with fire and heat and so forth. So that smoke, I think that natural smoke that happened here would have sort of encouraged germination. So I think, if we can do little sort of things like that can assist our processes, it's really helpful. Very pleased that the photo underneath was quite a large bag of Banksia marginata that I collected, and that's all pure seed there using a similar sort of process. So very, very happy about that. Our nursery based in Maui. So these, once the nursery or the propagation team, I deliver the seed to them, they then sow the seed, propagate vegetative material that I collect for them for cuttings material. As you can see, there's quite an expansive amount. We've got 3 igloos, 2 cutting houses, and a really large shade house, and we're still running out of room. So it's very, very successful growing that we have. The next photo, this is our nursery in Maui, where we grow, majority of our terrestrial stock is grown here. Again, it's ever expanding based on the amount of plants that we're aiming to grow is increasing each year. I think that's largely due to the whole sort of like environmental advances that we need to put in place with revegetation and redevelopment and all that sort of thing of our environmental spaces. The projects that are coming through in as far as land development and that sort of thing are requiring more and more plants to fill those spaces and get our habitat back to some sort of healthy and livable state. There we have another nursery at our Yarragon depot, which we grow mostly our ephemeral and our aquatic plants here. So the 2 slides on the left of the screen, they're aquatic plants and they're grown in sort of narrow, shallow ponds. The covers you can see are a must at this time of year, as I'm sure everyone has experienced. It's been particularly frosty this year already, so we just have to ensure that we cover all our little babies to keep that frost away from nipping at everything. So our depot at Yarragon is where all our crews work out of. It's our main office area as well. This area too is also our dispatch area. So most of our orders ready for dispatch, orders for landscaping projects, or our landscaping projects, any outsourced plants, advanced trees, etc., that we need for those projects are all housed at this location, so for distribution to wherever they need to be. At our Yarrigan site, these are examples of beds that we've planted, which are intended for use as more of seed production areas for us, so that I can collect seed from here. It's sort of ensuring that we've got access, ease of collecting for a lot of our commonly grown plants like lamandra, poas, things like that, which are used quite extensively in a lot of our projects, far and wide for most things. I think going forward, these seed production areas are going to become more and more important as we see more and more like revegetation and regeneration is occurring. And in generally speaking, seed will be becoming scarce as the sort of the in natural circumstances as these projects sort of demand more and more sort of seed that's required to revegetate. And so I think seed production areas are going to become more and more vital to continue that supply. And this in particular I think is really helpful, and certainly for our business, that we've got access quite readily to be able to collect seed for the large numbers that we grow, that it's easy and convenient and it's on tap, if you like. It's also, I think it's important too with a lot of the developments that are happening with a lot of these big developments, that we can also be using these sites as collection areas as well, just to sort of enhance and add to that sort of like seed supply for what's coming up. So going on to there, we do a lot of large scale landscaping projects and wetlands for developments, all that sort of thing, which are a requirement for sort of the housing developments. And what they do is basically capture all the stormwater from all these housing developments, filter that water with all the plantings, but it's also providing vital habitat for what may have been lost with all this development. For my job as seed collecting, these sort of sites are going to become more and more useful for collecting sites, that we won't be sort of, stripping sort of our natural environments of really sort of valuable resources, that we're adding to the environment, but also being able to use that as our little seed bank at the same time, which I think sort of like is quite important. It's also really easy collecting, to be able to collect from these sites too, largely because we know where the plants have come from, provenance-wise and all that sort of thing, if necessary, so that we know we can go back to the same sites if that sort of provenance is required in similar sort of areas. We know that we can collect from those sort of sites, and the plant material is going to be suitable for that area. The photograph in the middle here is just another example of what we can do that's sort of in settlement, construction at the moment. And those black rectangles, if you like, in the middle are floating wetlands. And so they're floating pontoons that are placed in and anchored, and then they'll be planted up with aquatic plants, and then they just basically float in the middle of the wetland, providing again habitat for nesting birds, so it's nice and safe, but also it's the filtration system for that whole wetland, if you like. They're quite interesting projects to do, and I think we've been involved in a couple of projects in particular. We've done a project in Hobart where we did a floating wetland installation, which was quite good. We also do a lot of revegetation, and here's some examples here of work we've done in conjunction with Greening Australia for carbon offset sites. There we've done those up in the Strzelecki Ranges, and as you can see, the terrain is quite hilly and challenging to work with, but we've got a pretty amazing team of planters who troll up and down those hillsides, dragging along their plants and their potapukis and pretend they're goats and plant up all those hillsides, which is wonderful. This the site in the middle is a project that we did in the Yarra Valley quite a few years ago now, and that's a complete sort of like revegetation project there, which is looking quite fabulous and very successful. And these again are sorts of projects that we can go back to source seed for similar sort of projects. The third slide again is a local housing development estate which was done a few years ago, and that again is been a very, very successful project. Lots of birds and water birds and what have you enjoy that site, and it's also really good collecting for me because, as I said, you know, we planted it up. I know it's planted there. It's easy collecting, and we can collect quite a lot, where normally out in the wild it might be sort of a bit more opportunistic. On top of all of this, as we sort of progress through what the other things that we do as a company, so we've got a natural resource management team, and they're involved in sort of the maintenance, the weed spraying, the mowing, the pest control, all those sorts of things in the after all our planting's been done. But we're also involved in projects in remote areas of East Gippsland, in the high country, where we do sort of a lot of willow control, that sort of thing, where we've got teams that camp out for days and go backpacking and spraying and cutting and pasting and all that sort of stuff, as well as, you know, teams that once we've landscaped and developed these development projects that we maintain for a period afterwards, whether it be a year or whatever. Usually projects like this may get handed back to council or what have you to maintain, but generally speaking, because it's done so well, that we usually get the contract handed back so that we can continue to maintain, which is a really good thing for us because I guess as a company, we're able to offer sort of services from start to finish. And so for this reason, I guess it's like why we get a lot of interesting projects to deal with, because we're able to offer sort of the services from start to finish. Leading into that, I will talk about a project that I'm personally involved with, and this is a seagrass restoration research project that's being run by the East Gippsland CMA, and we've been contracted to help them with that project. The object of this project is to potentially collect seagrass seed to revegetate sort of test areas to see if we can increase the seagrass seed meadows in the Gippsland lakes. Basically, the seagrass meadows are depleting worldwide due to pollution and sediment runoff from the land and so forth, which sort of buries them, is destroying their habitat. And so the idea of it all is to try and re-establish these seagrass meadows, because they're an important part of the marine environment for the enhancement of the coastal environment ecosystems, and to provide that habitat for fish and shellfish and all that sort of thing, which are being compromised because of the sort of the destruction or the lessening of the seagrass meadows in the environment. It's an interesting project in the Gippsland Lakes, because the seagrass is usually reacts to sort of intertidal currents and systems like that. The Gippsland Lakes don't sort of necessarily have those like you'd find in some of the other bays. It's a little bit more challenging into, how it's going to be sort of like populated, these areas too. What we've actually did was a couple of test sites have been selected, and initially one of my other colleagues from Habitat went down to the Gippsland Lakes. What they tried to do was to take plugs or take rhizomes of the seagrass and then translocate those into the test areas, which apparently was quite challenging to duck dive down to get these rhizomes, but then they did successfully plant them into the test area, only to go back the next day and find that they'd all been swallowed up by swans or other bird life. So the second time that we tried it, I was actually involved trying to collect the seagrass seed, which usually from about February to March is the time that you go looking for it. So we went down with Bridget Potts from the East Gippsland CMA and donned our wetsuits and snorkels and went duck diving for seagrass. It's really sort of tricky to find if you haven't really been used to it, it was totally new for me. But as you can see in the diagram or the photograph, the actual seagrass leaf, if you like, or shoot, is sort of shorter and contains all the seeds, as you can sort of see the lumpy bits in them, which is distinct from the actual seagrass leaves themselves. So it was very tricky to initially work out which were the productive shoots and which were just normal leaves. The first time that we tried it, it was quite a dull, overcast day. So when we went sort of duck diving and snorkeling around, it was quite hard to see because it was so dark. And so the next time we tried it was much sunnier, and so there was more success there in collecting that because it was easier to see. Although initially, once it was kind of tricky to differentiate those reproductive shoots from the leaves, but once was like you sort of spotted what you were seeing, it was a lot easier. So what we did then, we collected a lot of that, what we'll call biomass, we carried along sort of like little net handbags, collected it in that, and then transported it into buckets. Bridget and myself went down to the Deakin Uni Marine Research Centre in Queenscliff before we did all this, where they're doing seagrass studies. We went right through on their research, and they showed us how they actually collect the seagrass, store it, and then have it available for collection. So we were able to see their processes and what was involved. When they collect all their biomass, they've got massive big tanks, which they store it in for seed release. So in order to sort of emanate that on a smaller scale, we've got together, and this is the next slide you'll see. So this is just a bath of seawater. There was a tank of seawater brought in, and that was reticulated through a pump through the bath on a constant flow for sort of aeration and just to almost recreate or replicate a tidal current or just a flow. The biomass is suspended at the top like like bird netting, just to hold it above the water. So the seed leaves are positively buoyant. So in the natural sea, what they do is when they break off, because they're buoyant, they float along with the tides and the currents, and the seeds being negatively buoyant, when they break away from the reproductive shoots, they then sink to the bottom, to the seabed. By doing this water was changed on a fortnightly basis, I think, and out of that netting, all the seed eventually sank to the bottom of the bath, which was then retrieved. That was done over a period of, I think it was about 6 weeks that this process occurred. Then the seed was collected, the sediment, or most of the sediment, was sieved off, and then I collected it. That's, you can see in the bottom middle photograph. It was collected and I brought it back to the seed bank, where I've stored it in the fridge, wrapped up so it's dark, but it's been stored in autoclaved seawater, or it's sterilised seawater, which I was able to collect from Marine Research Centre. That I change weekly, that water, and as you can see on the right hand side, it's now quite clean and free of rubbish and debris and that sort of stuff. And the sterilised water will just help sort of keep those seeds healthy and free of disease. So they're quite small. As you can see, the seed next to the ruler there, it's about 2 millimetres long. It's quite tiny. There's about 400 seeds to the gram. So what I did was I weighed it here. That's still got a bit of sediment and what have you, and it is wet, but I weighed it approximately 5 grams. So out of, I think it was about 10 kilo of biomass, we got about 5 grams of seed, which I guess approximately relates to, we should have about 2,000 seeds, I think, there. From then, this will be stored in the seed bank till about October, when it's time to sow it, if you like. And then we're still yet to work out which is the best method. It has been tested that it's been sown in little Hessian bags in sediment, and then sort of floated, dropped down to the seabed, or which we are considering doing is making like a clay seed ball out of sediment and impregnating that little ball with the seed, and then planting it down in the sediment in the test areas in probably about October. That's quite interesting, and I think too it's interesting to see with these seeds is they've got a little sort of, I guess, mechanism to help them sort of do their thing. So they develop what's called a hypocotyl hair, if you like, which are little anchoring hairs, and these are produced on the seed before the sort of their true roots develop. And what those little hairs do is they act like a little anchorage system to help bed those seeds down and attach themselves to the sediment layer, so they don't sort of like wash away or float away, and it facilitates the sort of water source for the seeds before the true roots occur. So I think that's a pretty little interesting way of germinating in a successful manner, or reproducing in a successful manner. That's about the seagrass. A similar project we've got that we're involved with Greening Australia is down the Gippsland Lakes too, and that's the redevelopment of salt marsh into disused and overgrown farmland. The first side is this landholder's property which has a nice salt marsh area, and they're trying to replicate that over this overgrazed site on the other side of the road by planting that, which will hopefully develop into a good salt marsh habitat area, but it also will take up a lot of carbon in these situations, the marine situations. It's what's called blue carbon, and it's similar to sort of carbon offsetting like that you'd see in farmland with trees, but in this case it's with saltwater plants. And it is said that those sort of like the what's called blue carbon, the area that it can take up is greater than land carbon offset sites, just because of the sheer sort of coverage that it has. And so the whole idea of this is to plant these sites with the salt marsh, and that will provide an carbon offset site for the farmers, so that there'll be a way to sort of have this as a productive sort of area that is, as it is being overgrazed and sort of a useless bit of area. So we had to go down and collect three different salt marsh materials, which were these three, which we've then brought back, divided up in the nursery, and they produced really well. We also trialled growing some of the Swader, which is the one in the middle, germinating and growing that by seed, which was successful also. And now we have successfully grown roughly about 10,000 of these species, which are going to be planted back into that site in October sometime by our teams down there. So again, another really good project to be involved with. So if this is successful, it can mean that this could develop into sort of developing more wasted farmland sites for this purpose. And so finally, the last project or thing that we're involved with is in collaboration with Mine Land Rehabilitation Authority. Our company director, Steve Horton, has designed and created these wonderful, amazing little seed sticks or cards. And the whole idea is, I don't know if you can see that, but one side of the card has little group of seed attached. And the idea is that side of the card is planted. The other side of the card has a QR code on it, which you can go to the Mine Land Rehabilitation Authority website, which gives you information on the cards and growing the seed and what that's all about. We used it sort of like as a bit of an educational tool at a recent event that we did, and we used those as a planting activity for young students at a secondary college to sort of learn about the local plants that can be used in the mine land rehab projects, and sort of the value that they have as far as growing habitat and the use of using plants local to your area and so forth. They did a little planting activity with these little seed sticks into a little jiffy pot, planted, as you can see, and then they got to take those homes. In the future, I think they'll be a really useful educational tool to raise awareness. I think that Mineland Rehab have that intention of to sort of get the word out that, you know, potentially in schools and so forth, that they can use these cards to sow their own little seed plots and create their own little seed production areas for their own projects. So that is about it for me. I think I've probably talked way too much, Al.
Not at all. No, perfect timing. That was amazing. You guys do so many different sorts of projects. I had no idea. And I think it really just goes to show that seed really does underpin almost every kind of revegetative and rehabilitative activity out there. Thank you for sharing some of your challenges and tribulations, especially with the seagrass related seed, because, you know, that's new territory, I think. It was a wonderful presentation, Sharon. I'm already getting feedback saying thank you and how great it was. And thank you for being our first presenter of our Seeds of Knowledge webinar series. That's Sharen Coulter from Habitat Creations. This whole program was funded by Bullock and Northern Grampians Landcare Network. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming along, and we will see you at the next one.